devil's trick. I've never been one to believe in ghost stories. Sure, I enjoy a good scare during Halloween, but deep down, I always thought it was just make-believe. Something to laugh at when the lights came back on. That was until last Halloween. That night changed everything. That night, I learned that some legends aren't just stories. It started with a party. Josh, my best friend, had scored an invite to the biggest Halloween event in town. It was being held at the old Crawley Estate, a place that had been abandoned for years after some gruesome murder no one ever liked to talk about. But on Halloween night, it had been rented out for a killer party, complete with a haunted house theme. Josh convinced me to go, even though I felt uneasy. "Come on, dude," he grinned, adjusting his vampire cape. "It's all in good fun. Besides, you gotta see how insane this place looks." I agreed, despite the gnawing feeling in my gut. The night was chilly, and as we approached the Crawley Estate, fog curled around our feet like skeletal fingers. The mansion loomed before us, its towering Gothic frame silhouetted against the full moon. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the long driveway, their sinister grins flickering in the wind. Music pulsed from inside, but the atmosphere outside was different. Too quiet, like the place itself was watching us. Once inside, the party was in full swing. People were everywhere. Some dancing, some laughing, and others wandering through the haunted house rooms set up throughout the mansion. The decor was impressive. Cobwebs draped over ancient chandeliers, red lights casting eerie glows over mannequins dressed as ghouls, and ominous whispers playing through hidden speakers. Josh and I grabbed some drinks and explored. The place was massive, with winding hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. Then we found the door. It was at the end of a dimly lit corridor, slightly ajar, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. "No way," I muttered. Josh, of course, grinned. "Let's check it out." Before I could protest, he was already descending. I hesitated for a moment, then followed. The basement smelled of damp earth and something else. Something rotten. As our flashlights flickered against the stone walls, I noticed strange symbols scratched into them. Deep, jagged marks that looked like they had been made in a hurry. And then we saw it. At the center of the room stood an old wooden table, and on it, an ornate Ouija board covered in dust. Josh's eyes lit up. "Dude, we have to try this." I shook my head. "I don't know, man. This place feels off." He ignored me, setting his drink down and placing his fingers on the planchette. "Come on, just one question." Reluctantly, I joined him. "Is anyone here?" he asked, his voice teasing. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the planchette moved. "Yes." I yanked my hands away. "Josh, let's go." But he grinned wider. "What's your name?" The planchette shot across the board, spelling out one chilling word. "Trick." Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut upstairs. We bolted up the stairs, but no matter how hard we pushed, the door wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. "Josh, help me!" He was pounding on it, shouting for help, but the music from the party drowned us out. Then we heard it. Soft footsteps, coming from behind us. I turned, heart hammering. The basement, once empty, now wasn't. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, twisted, and featureless except for a gaping mouth that stretched too wide. My breath caught in my throat as it whispered in a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping against stone. "Trick or treat!" Josh screamed, scrambling away from it, but the figure only took a slow step forward. I grabbed an old chair and hurled it at the thing. The moment it shattered, the lights flickered, and the basement door creaked open. We didn't waste another second, tearing up the stairs and bursting into the crowded party. Everything looked normal. The music blared, people laughed, and no one even noticed our panicked expressions. "Let's get out of here," I panted, pulling Josh towards the front door. But he wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on something across the room. There, in the crowd, was the figure. It stood completely still, watching us with that mouthless face. "We have to go," I urged, but Josh was frozen. Then the lights cut out. Screams erupted as the mansion was plunged into darkness. I reached for Josh, but he was gone. The music distorted into something wrong. Warped laughter, shrill and piercing, echoing through the house. People shoved past me, desperate to escape, but I couldn't find him. And then I heard his voice. Help me. It was coming from the basement. I didn't want to go back down there, but I couldn't leave him. Taking a deep breath, I crept down the stairs once more. The smell of decay was stronger, the air thick and suffocating. Josh's voice echoed through the room, but it was off, like a recording playing on a loop. Help me. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling in my grip. The Ouija board was still on the table, but now something else was there. A mask, a grinning, grotesque Halloween mask. And in the corner stood the figure. Only now it was wearing Josh's clothes. I stumbled backward, realizing the thing hadn't just taken him. It had become him. Help me, it whispered again, stepping closer, that stretched mouth splitting wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth beneath the mask. I ran. I don't remember how I got out of the house, but when I did, the party was over. The mansion was dark, empty. No lights, no people, just silence. I called Josh's phone, but it rang inside the house, from the basement. I never saw him again. It's been a year, and Halloween is here again. I don't go out anymore. I don't celebrate. But last night, I found something on my doorstep. A small, grinning mask. And a note. Trick. I burned it. But I know it's not over. The Halloween Dare. I should have known better. I should have listened when they said not to mess with things we didn't understand. But it was just supposed to be a game, a stupid Halloween dare. It all started with my friend, Ryan. He was always the one pushing things too far. Every Halloween, he came up with some ridiculous challenge for our group, but this year's was the worst yet. We should do the Devil's Doorstep challenge, he said, grinning like he already knew we'd say yes. I remember sitting in his garage, the air thick with the scent of pumpkin candles and stale beer. What the hell is that? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Ryan's grin widened. There's this abandoned house at the edge of town. Used to belong to some old guy who disappeared like 50 years ago. Legend says if you knock on the front door at midnight and say, trick or treat, 3 times, something answers. My stomach twisted at the idea, but Sam laughed it off. Dude, that's just some urban legend. Ryan shrugged. Maybe, but I dare you, and that was all it took. We piled into Ryan's car around 11:30 p.m., the streets buzzing with kids in costumes and glowing jack-o'-lanterns. As we left town behind, the decorations faded, replaced by thick, looming trees and the kind of darkness that swallows headlights. The house stood at the end of a long dirt road, hidden behind overgrown bushes and a rusting iron gate that squealed when Ryan pushed it open. It was worse than I expected. Peeling paint, boarded up windows, and a sagging roof that looked like it would collapse at any second. A cold wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint smell of damp leaves and something rotten. We stood there for a moment, staring. I could tell Sam wanted to back out, and honestly, so did I. But Ryan, he just marched up to the front door like he owned the place. Midnight, he said, checking his phone. Ready? I swallowed hard, stepping onto the crumbling porch beside him. Sam hung back, glancing nervously at the dark woods surrounding us. Ryan raised his fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps against the warped wood. Trick or treat, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Silence. He knocked again. Trick or treat. A gust of wind rattled the trees, but nothing else happened. Sam let out a nervous chuckle. Told you. Let's just trick or treat, Ryan said for the 3rd time. The door creaked open. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't much, just a few inches, but enough to reveal a sliver of pitch-black darkness inside. None of us moved. Okay, Sam whispered. We're done. Let's go. Ryan smirked. Scared, I was, but I wouldn't admit it. Let's just leave, man. Then, from inside the house, a voice whispered, Come in. Ryan, being Ryan, pushed the door open wider. Dude, this is insane. I could barely see past him. but my phone's flashlight cut through the gloom just enough to show a dusty, cluttered hallway. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains, and broken furniture littered the floor. I didn't want to go inside, but when Ryan stepped over the threshold, I couldn't just leave him. Sam swore under his breath and followed. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It was colder, heavier, like stepping into a tomb. The door groaned shut behind us, and I jumped. "All right," Ryan said, shining his flashlight around. "Let's explore." The house smelled of decay and mildew, and every step we took stirred up clouds of dust. The floors creaked under our weight, and I kept expecting them to give out beneath us. We moved deeper into the house, past the crumbling living room with its sagging furniture and shattered picture frames. I felt like we were being watched, though I couldn't see anything in the suffocating darkness. Then Sam gasped, "Did you hear that?" I froze. A faint scratching sound echoed from upstairs. Ryan grinned. "Rats, probably, but it didn't sound like rats. It sounded like nails dragging along wood." We climbed the staircase, the old boards groaning under our weight. At the top, a long hallway stretched before us, lined with closed doors. Ryan tried the first one. Locked. He moved to the next. Locked. But the third, it opened with a horrible creak, revealing a bedroom frozen in time. Dusty toys lay scattered on the floor, and a rotting crib sat in the corner. I stepped inside hesitantly, feeling like I was trespassing in something sacred. Then I saw the writing on the wall. "Leave," carved into the plaster over and over again, deep and desperate. My stomach twisted, and I backed away. "Guys," I whispered, "we need to get out of here." Ryan, of course, laughed. "Oh, come on. It's just..." Then the crib moved. Just a little. A soft creak as if something inside had shifted. I shone my flashlight toward it, and my heart stopped. A figure stood behind the crib. Small, barely visible in the dim light, but its eyes, they glowed. We bolted. The hallway twisted, somehow longer than before. Doors that had been locked now stood open, revealing dark, empty rooms with shifting shadows. Behind us, something followed. I didn't look back, but I heard it, soft, shuffling footsteps and whispers that grew louder the faster we ran. We reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard we pulled, it stayed shut. Then, in the reflection of the cracked window pane, I saw it. A face, pale, hollow eyes, a mouth stretched too wide in a grin that didn't belong on any human. It loomed just behind us. Ryan screamed. Sam pounded on the door. Then, it spoke. "Trick or treat." The lights flickered, and suddenly, the door flew open. We stumbled out onto the porch, gasping for air. I didn't dare look back. We sprinted to the car and peeled out of there, gravel kicking up behind us. None of us spoke the whole ride home. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ryan. "Guys, I think something followed me home." He wouldn't answer his phone after that. When I went to his house later, his mom said he wasn't there, that he'd left sometime in the middle of the night. I never saw him again, and sometimes, late at night, I hear it outside my window, a whisper, "Trick or treat." The last Halloween. I always loved Halloween. The decorations, the costumes, the candy, everything about it felt magical. But after last year, I don't think I'll ever celebrate it again. Some things shouldn't be disturbed, no matter how fun they seem. Started with a dare. My best friend Josh was always looking for ways to up the stakes on Halloween night. We were 16, too old for trick-or-treating but too young for any real parties. So instead, he came up with something else. "There's this old house on Sycamore Street," he said one afternoon in October, his voice hushed like he was sharing some dark secret. "You know the one. Abandoned for years, but the lights come on every Halloween at midnight." I scoffed. "Yeah, right. Urban legend." Josh grinned. "Then prove it. Let's go inside this year." I should have said no. October 31st arrived, and by the time the sun set, the entire town was alive with laughter and the flickering glow of jack-o'-lanterns. Kids ran up and down the sidewalks in their costumes, and parents chatted on porches. Felt safe. Felt normal. We met up at the corner near Josh's house. Our other friends, Sam and Kelly, were already there, bundled up against the chill. Kelly looked uneasy. "Guys, I heard some people went missing near that house a few years ago," she said. "Maybe we shouldn't." Josh rolled his eyes. "It's just a house. Come on." I forced a smile, trying to push down the nagging feeling in my gut. It was just a stupid dare, right? We made our way down Sycamore Street, and as we got closer, the festive noise of the town seemed to fade. The houses thinned out, replaced by shadows cast from the towering oak trees lining the street. Then we saw it. The house loomed in the darkness like something out of a nightmare. 3 stories tall, with broken windows and ivy crawling up its stone facade. The iron gate at the front was rusted shut, but Josh climbed over it with ease. The rest of us followed reluctantly. As we stood in the overgrown yard, I noticed something chilling. The porch light was on. "All right," Josh said, pulling out his phone. 5 minutes inside. Then we go. Sam hesitated. "What if someone's in there?" "Then we apologize and leave," Josh replied with a grin. I swallowed hard as we crept up the front steps. The wood groaned beneath our feet, and I swear I heard something shift inside. Josh tried the doorknob. It opened. The smell hit me first. Musty, damp, with an underlying hint of something rotting. My flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating a grand hallway covered in dust. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and a thick layer of grime coated everything. Kelly stayed near the door. "We should hurry," she whispered. Josh moved deeper into the house. "Relax. Just take a look around." Reluctantly, we followed him down the hall. The farther we went, the colder it got. And then we heard it, a soft creaking sound, coming from upstairs. I froze. "Josh, did you hear that?" He waved me off. "It's probably just the house settling," but I wasn't so sure. We passed what looked like a sitting room, filled with broken furniture and an old fireplace. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A bowl of candy. It sat on the mantel, perfectly arranged, as if someone had just put it there. And next to it, a note written in shaky handwriting. "Take one." I turned to Josh. "Dude, someone's been here." He shrugged and reached for a piece of candy. "Hey, free snack." The moment he touched it, something upstairs crashed. We all screamed. "Let's get out of here," Kelly said, backing toward the front door. But Josh, ever the idiot, decided to keep going. He motioned toward the staircase. "Come on, don't you want to see what's up there?" I shook my head furiously. "No, we're leaving." But before I could stop him, he was halfway up the stairs. "Chicken," he called down, disappearing into the darkness. I heard Sam swear under his breath and take off after him. Kelly and I exchanged a look before following, our flashlights trembling in our hands. The second floor was worse. The air was thick, suffocating. The wallpaper here was torn away completely, revealing wood that had been carved with strange symbols. Some of them looked fresh. And then we saw the bedroom door. It was wide open. Josh stood frozen in the doorway. "Guys," his voice trembled. I stepped up beside him and looked inside. There, on the bed, was a mannequin dressed in an old-fashioned Halloween costume. A clown, its faded face paint cracked into an unsettling smile. But it wasn't the mannequin that made my blood run cold. It was the mirror beside it. In the reflection, the mannequin wasn't sitting. It was standing. We bolted. Josh shoved past us, screaming like I'd never heard before. I didn't even think about looking back. I just ran. The whole house seemed to groan around us as if it were alive, the floorboards shuddering beneath our feet. We reached the front door and slammed into it, but it didn't budge. Sam yanked at the handle, his face pale with terror. It stuck. Behind us, footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, heavy, deliberate. And then that voice. "Trick or treat." I screamed, pounding against the door. Kelly was sobbing. Suddenly, it burst open, and we tumbled outside into the cold night air. The street was empty. No trick-or-treaters, no lights, just silence. We didn't stop running until we were halfway down the street. Only then did we dare to look back. The house stood there, silent and dark. The porch light was off, but in the upstairs window I saw it. A figure, watching. We never talked about that night again. Josh moved away a few months later and Sam transferred schools. Kelly and I just drifted apart. But Halloween hasn't been the same since. Sometimes I feel like I see that house when I walk home late at night, even when I know I shouldn't. And every year, when October 31st rolls around, I find a single piece of candy on my doorstep, with a note, "Take one." I never do. The last house on Hollow Street. I should have stayed home that Halloween. Instead, I let my friends talk me into it, one last trick-or-treating run for old time's sake. We were too old for it, sure, but there was something about that last Halloween before adulthood that made us want to hold on to the tradition. We decided to hit the outskirts of town this year, down Hollow Street. You know the one. The street where the old Holloway house sat, abandoned and rotting. A local legend whispered between kids in hushed tones. People said a whole family had gone missing there years ago, vanished overnight without a trace. The house had been boarded up since, but every Halloween, someone swore they saw lights flickering inside. I didn't believe the stories. Not really. But as soon as we turned onto that street, something felt wrong. It was me, Kevin, and Sarah. Kevin was the one who suggested we hit the house. "Come on," he said, grinning under his cheap vampire mask. "Nobody ever dares to knock. We'll be legends." Sarah wasn't so sure. "I don't know, guys. My mom told me weird stuff happens around here. She said some kid went missing last year." I laughed it off, but deep down, my stomach twisted. The air was heavier on Hollow Street, the trees arching over the road like skeletal fingers reaching toward us. The houses were sparse here, their decorations few and far between. And then we saw it. The Holloway house. It sat at the very end of the street, shrouded in darkness, looking more like a forgotten relic than a home. No lights, no decorations, nothing. Just a towering, shadowy structure with boarded windows and an eerie stillness. Kevin, of course, ran right up to the front steps. "Let's do it," he whispered. I swallowed hard and followed, with Sarah trailing behind. We stood at the front door, staring at the peeling wood and rusted knocker shaped like a screaming face. Kevin grinned. "Trick or treat," he called, rapping his knuckles against the door. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. "Come on, maybe they're giving out full-sized candy bars." Sarah elbowed him. "No one's home. Let's just go." But then, the door creaked open. I'll never forget the sound. Slow, agonizing, like the house was sighing after years of silence. Beyond the threshold, darkness swallowed everything. A thick, unnatural blackness that made my skin crawl. "Nope, nope, we are not going in there," Sarah said, turning to leave. But Kevin, ever the idiot, stepped inside. I should have stopped him. I should have grabbed him and run. Instead, I stood frozen as he disappeared into the house. "Come on, don't be a chicken," his voice echoed from inside. I hesitated, glancing at Sarah. She shook her head furiously, but I couldn't leave him in there. "5 minutes," I whispered. "Then we're out." We stepped inside. The air inside was wrong, thick with dust and something else, something rotten. I could barely see past the foyer, but I could hear Kevin laughing somewhere deeper in the house. "This place is awesome," he shouted. I reached into my pocket, flicking on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper, shattered picture frames, and furniture draped in dusty white sheets. Sarah clung to my arm. "We shouldn't be here." "I know," I whispered, stepping forward. Then we heard it, a soft creaking sound, like footsteps overhead. "Kevin?" I called out, but my voice sounded small. No answer. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, moving above us. And then something moved at the top of the staircase. My flashlight flickered over it, and for a split second I saw a face, pale, hollow eyes, a twisted grin stretched too wide. And it was watching us. We bolted. Sarah screamed first, and I followed, grabbing her hand and sprinting toward the front door. But when we reached it, it was closed. No, it wasn't just closed. It was gone. Where the door had been moments ago, There was now just a solid wall. The same peeling wallpaper covering what should have been our escape. We pounded on it, but it was useless. "Let us out," Sarah cried, tears in her eyes. Then, from deeper in the house, we heard Kevin's voice. "Guys, help me." It didn't sound right. It was distant, echoing through the halls in a way that made my skin crawl. We turned, slowly, and saw the dark hallway stretching before us. Longer than it should have been. Impossible. Shadows clung to the corners, shifting and twisting like they were alive. Sarah shook her head. "It's not him." The voice came again, more desperate. "Please. It hurts." And against every instinct screaming at me to run, I took a step forward. The deeper we went, the worse it got. The walls seemed to breathe. The old wooden floor creaked beneath our feet, and that rotten smell grew stronger. We found Kevin's flashlight near the base of a staircase leading down. It flickered weakly, pointing toward the basement door. "Help me," his voice whimpered again, but this time, it was right behind us. We turned, and there he was. Kevin, but not Kevin. His face was wrong, twisted, stretched like something had tried to wear his skin as a mask. His eyes were dark pits, and his mouth opened too wide, lips curling into a grin that revealed rows of too sharp teeth. He took a step closer. Sarah grabbed my arm, whispering, "That's not Kevin." My heart pounded. I didn't know what to do. Then, it lunged. We ran, blindly crashing through the dark halls, tripping over broken furniture and debris. The thing wearing Kevin's face laughed behind us, that awful sound filling the house. And then we saw it. A door. We didn't think. We burst through it. We were outside. Just like that, we were standing on the front lawn, gasping for breath. The Holloway house loomed behind us, dark and silent. But Kevin, he wasn't with us. "Where is he?" Sarah sobbed, spinning in circles. "We have to go back." I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I stared at the house. Its windows were dark, lifeless. But somewhere inside, I swore I could still hear that voice. "Help me." We didn't go back. The police never found him. The next day, we tried to explain, but they didn't believe us. Said the Holloway house had been abandoned for decades. But I know what I saw, and every Halloween since, I hear it. A whispering voice from my bedroom window. "Help me."